The whole have you done the thing where like you can use your phone on a MacBook as your webcam?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
That shit actually works so well, but the camera is so zoomed in that like you have to have it so it's just a whole other.
No, I know what you mean. Yeah, we're getting to the point. We're not quite there yet, but like the iPhone mic is pretty good too. Like pretty soon we won't even need all this external shit.
I mean, think about all these fucking IRL streamers that just basically use a phone.
That's true. Yeah. Is that
like
still a thing? Like, because that was such a big thing for a while.
No, it's still as big as ever. When I went to Toronto a few weeks ago, there's this dude, you know Fusi?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was literally sat next to him on the entire flight.
Okay.
It was horrible. It was the worst. He literally it was a red eye and I was just trying to sleep. And like the first 3 hours of the flight, because he couldn't be on his live stream, like he couldn't IRL stream on a fucking plane.
Yeah.
He was sitting there with his phone screen at 200% brightness, like screaming at Discord and like taking phone calls. And then he would like drop his headphones and turn on my light and his light. It was like dude.
Is that just that dude? Like, because I know who he is, but I don't really know much about him. Is that just his life? Like he's just streaming 24/7, basically?
Yeah. That's how he's relevant now. Because like, I didn't even remember, but back in the day, like FusiTube, like he was like the first prank streamer,
right?
Or YouTube creator. You know, like he was that guy who would just like kind of started that wave of like go into public and like fuck with people.
Yeah.
But now he's just like, he's awful. He's
what a nightmare existence, man. That's like,
dude, that's what I was thinking. I was like, I can't remember who it was, but it was one of the guys on my crew was like, man, like that's a pretty chill, job. Like you just like, and I mean, I did it, I mean, not to the level that he did, but, in 2019, we did an IRL stream during my Australia, New Zealand tour.
Oh, okay.
And the amount of time that Twitch wanted us to be on was just like, it was so crazy, dude. Like I can't turn it on that often. Like,
dude, I mean, there's something dystopian about it where it's just like, I don't know, man. Cause that's, you tell me if you agree, because you've done this more than I have. But for me, it's like when that camera's on and you're just kind of chilling and all that, it can be fun and you can be authentic to a certain extent, but it's not real life. You know what I mean? Like you're not living a real life.
Yeah. But I mean, I feel like some people, like maybe like XQC is a good example. Like that dude literally just like is himself 24/7. And like just rakes it in.
Yeah.
Cause like he's gotten to the point now where people like he doesn't need to put on a show anymore. Like he literally can like turn on his stream and just be sitting there drinking a cup of coffee, staring at the screen. And that's like good enough for people.
Yeah.
But for most people, it's like, I mean, you're like a full-time actor for sure. But then at the same time, it's kind of like a really close friend of mine that I went to middle school and high school with. He's not like a mega star streamer or anything, but his full-time job is that he's a Twitch streamer. He plays Destiny 2. That's all he does. And he just wakes up and he plays Destiny all fucking day. And he makes a good living, by all intents and purposes, like he makes a really good living, and it's like, he's happy as a fucking clam because he gets to do what he loves every day, just kind of like we do, but like,
oh, for sure. Yeah.
Same, but different.
Yeah. And that kind of thing I think is great. Like, yeah, it's more the kind of, for me, when somebody just turns their life into like just monetizes your entire life. There's something kind of bleak about that to me, Or like for me, now that I'm a parent, like all the family YouTubers. Oh yeah.
That just like, dude, that shit is dark. It's not as bad as NPC streams, but it's close.
Yeah. Did you see, I'm sure you saw that one YouTube like mom who just got arrested for child abuse. Did you see that?
Yeah, I haven't read into it too much, but I saw the headlines.
Yeah, I mean, I read one article, so what do I know? But it sounded like basically, yeah, she was like a very popular YouTuber mom for years. And there was some controversy
that her kids probably weren't stoked on it, and she like, abused them into playing along. It's crazy,
more or less, yeah. And it was
concept.
it was something like she was locking them in basement. I mean, it was very bad.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean, again, whoever's listening to this, go read the article. Don't take my word. But it was something dark like that, and it's. That's the other thing, man.
Surprise me in the least.
Right, because the people who put themselves out there as like, I'm the authority for this, you come to me for all this, it's always like they're acting out because they're compensating for something else,
Yeah, or it's like oh God, I was just listening to a podcast recently. I'm a big purveyor of the podcast now. Me too. I did used to have a podcast back in the day.
I remember I was just listening back to the first one you and I did, and we were talking about your podcast.
Yeah. One of the podcasts I listen to all the time is it's called The WAN Show, Linus Tech Tips, if you're familiar.
Oh,
it's like
sure.
the biggest tech gaming, whatever podcast basically out there. And they were talking a few weeks ago about, I can't remember where it was. I think it's Chicago, Illinois is about to pass a law that if your children are in YouTube videos, TikTok videos, so on and so forth, anything that's monetized on the internet, whatever percentage of those videos they're in, they are entitled and required to be paid a certain percentage of the royalties and revenue generated from these videos. And I thought, A, that's really cool. And B, it's going to really fuck some people's days up, because these parents that like are basically living off their children, monetizing the shit out of them, they're going to realize like, oh shit, we can't buy all these fancy cars and stuff anymore because we actually have to pay these, It's basically like child labor, unpaid child labor. It's super fucked.
Depending on how young you start, like the kids can't consent to be in it anyway, Well,
exactly. And that's the whole issue. And it's like, even for Joanne and I, as new parents, it's like we're so torn between like, you're so excited about this thing that you have, this child that you bring into the world is like literally the greatest gift the planet has ever received in your mind, and everyone should see them and everyone should worship them the way that you do. So all you want to do is post about them and talk about them and this and that. But then it's also like, I don't want to be one of those fucking people that is like extorting my child for, fucking Instagram likes.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is. Like, it's so fucked. But like,
is there a thought in your mind? Cause I don't have a kid, but I've always thought that if I did, like, there's a large part of me that would want to keep them away from social media entirely as long as I possibly could in every way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So here's my take on it. And I think Joanne's would be very different. As a kid, my dad was really into technology. He had the first Macintosh when it came out. He got the first iPhone. Like, he got us an Xbox when it first came out because he was excited about it. Like,
right.
And he kind of, fed my interest in technology through his own. And, I think that that's a big reason why I ended up where I am. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I think that there's just like kind of this inherent thing that like you have to be a fucking nerd to a certain degree to get into making music on a computer. There's just no two ways about it in my mind.
Oh, for sure.
So, I'm a little biased in the sense that like, I feel like being exposed to certain technology early on in my childhood and my development kind of, made me more apt to kind of, be able to learn all these things. Like I was able to figure out how to like torrent and like code and like do all this shit, like, you know, years and years and years before anyone even really knew what that was, just because like I was a child of the internet, you know what I mean? But what you're talking about is completely different, because like back then, like social media wasn't a thing. Like it was, the closest thing was, I guess, MySpace, but that wasn't until like high school, I guess. But I guess my kind of mentality is it's kind of almost like sheltering your kids from ice cream, right?
Right. I know.
You don't
exactly
give them ice cream. You never let them eat ice cream. Then they go to Sally's house, and Sally's parents let you eat ice cream. And then all of a sudden you're fucking sneaking out of the house in the middle of the night to go to 7-Eleven to eat all the ice cream. And you end up being 350 pounds, stealing your parents' money to go get ice cream. You know, like that's obviously an exaggeration, but
but that's true, man. That's like, there's so many examples. I mean, I had it in my childhood too, where like there wasn't a lot of junk food around, that sort of thing. And then when I would get out of the house, I'd go crazy on junk food, that kind of thing. Yeah. And I still have food issues and all that. And I think a lot of it probably does come from those earlier years. But I think,
or even like I grew up with kids that, you know, they, for one reason or another, we're very sheltered from, you know, drugs and alcohol, partying, so on and so forth. And especially not even kids I just grew up with, but when I went to college for the whopping 11 months that I was there, just because of where I went to school, I ended up with a lot of kids that like really had never like partied that much. And when I was in high school, like, whether it was a good thing or a bad thing, like that was not something that we were in a shortage of, so to speak. So like by the time I got to college, I kind of knew what the deal was. And like, you know, I wasn't like itching to get out there and like try all the things and do all these crazy things. Like, so, and I saw a lot of kids go like way too hard, way too fast, you know, and it can like irreparably, like as bad as, you know, teen drinking and all this stuff is, it's like I think there's some sort of balance of, you know, leniency that's required to kind of let kids, you know, figure their boundaries out in a relatively safe environment.
It's funny. You're making me think now, there's got to be some component of it that's genetic too, like the nature versus nurture thing. Because if just using myself as another example, like I was just talking about that food thing. I also I didn't party at all when I was a kid. I didn't have a drop of alcohol till I was like 22 or 23. But for whatever reason, that I never had a problem with, which is interesting because that for me was just like one day I tried it and, you know, then I had some drinks and it was fine. And I never really went too far or went crazy with it. And I wonder, it's like, it's all a balance, man. Cause you want to give the kid the opportunity to sort of try everything in life, figure out their own boundaries. But then I don't know, so much of what we learn is like just from watching our parents and observing the world around us when we're kids too. Yeah. Like I think it's like you can tell your kids whatever you want, but so much of what they're going to learn is just going to be kind of the background shit, you know? Yeah.
Well, and I almost feel like, and maybe this is just the kind of kid I was, is like telling them what to do and what not to do is like actually, you know, you're generally going to get the opposite effect almost every time. I mean, luckily I was a pretty good kid, you know, most of the time. So I didn't, you know, go too off the rails, so to speak. But like, it's just, it's going to be fucking tough. All I know is my child isn't a year old yet, and it's great. It's fucking great. I don't even have to tell her not to do anything because she doesn't do it.
That's right. And congrats, man. I haven't talked to you since you had the kid. It's amazing.
I appreciate it. So to kind of like put a bow on the question that you're asking or were initially asking, this is what I always say to Joanne when we have these conversations is by the time that she's old enough for us to worry about all these social media things, one of two things is going to have happened. Either there's going to be way worse shit than TikTok that we have to worry about, or something catastrophic is going to have happened that will actually, kind of set things back on the right track, and it won't be as big of a problem. Right.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, the paradigm is always changing. And so, like worrying about what's happening right now, 5 years into the future, you're exactly right. It's like, no, there's going to be other stuff to worry about.
Yeah, we're going to have to worry about like fucking eye implant VR screens that like literally you don't even know if they're on or not because they're inside your child's eyeball. So it's like,
the argument is going to be like, can she have 2 screens in her eyes or just one? Like, that's going to be the argument,
Or like, is there a parental control so that like at 8:30 at night, the eye screen shuts off so that they like, oh man,
dude, it's insane, dude. But let me ask you this, man, because, having a kid, when you and I first talked on this podcast, it was like at the start of the pandemic, and so much has happened since then. And in your life, in the world, all of that, how has this changed, like kind of a general question, like how has this changed you as an artist, like as a producer, as a DJ? Like, do you look at what you're doing or how you're approaching it differently now that you've had a kid, now that a few years have passed? Do you feel different as an artist?
Yeah. I mean, I'll be completely honest. And I feel like, maybe I haven't necessarily said it on such a public forum, but it's worth mentioning just because it's the truth. And I'm generally just a pretty open guy as far as my brand is concerned. But even before having a kid, it was like, COVID happened. And I think a lot of us that had been, touring nonstop for however many years in a row, we're like, okay, cool. Like we had to take a break for a little bit. Like there's no rat race anymore. Like everyone's on pause. Like we can kind of like, recharge and regenerate ourselves. And then when touring comes back, it's going to be like, boom, it's going to be crazy. You're going to be, whatever. And without, getting too deep down the rabbit hole, I got back to touring and I was like, fuck, man, kind of like being at home.
Yeah.
Like, and again, that's kind of one of those things that like, I think and like, I don't even like calling myself a DJ anymore just cause I hate that term, especially
Why?
because
what's wrong with DJ?
Well, for me, like I'm not a DJ. I'm not Craze. I'm not A-Track. I'm not
I see what you're saying.
You know what I mean? Like I'm also not a wedding DJ.
Right.
Like,
have you ever DJ'd a wedding?
I have.
Nice.
Yeah, I DJ'd my first wedding like a year and a half ago. It was really tight. It was actually
fun.
Really cool.
I've done a couple, man. They can be cool.
But my point is like, especially now that I live in, outside of the LA bubble and the LA sphere, and I'm around a lot of people that aren't necessarily exposed to the, you say you're a DJ in LA and just about anyone of any age is like, oh yeah, I get it. Like you're, Diplo or something. Like right. You're a wannabe Diplo. Cool. Got it. No problem. But, I meet a lot of people nowadays that like, you get that kind of like, it's like the typical, like you're at a wedding and like your friend's uncle or whatever is there. And they're like, oh, you're a DJ. So like you DJ weddings? No. Okay. So you play like clubs around town or whatever? No, not really. Like, it's not. So my point is like, even without all of that, I still like, I quantify myself as a music producer who happens to DJ, right? Like my passion and my craft is producing music. And the point of, kind of bringing this all up is like, as someone who has always been a music producer, whose number one goal has always been to produce music and create music, there is a level of reclusiveness and being a homebody that is kind of, imperative to being someone who's okay with locking themselves away in a studio for 10 hours a day to make tunes.
Sure.
Like if all you cared about doing was traveling the world and like fucking being cool and whatever, like you're not going to have and I mean, this is a whole other can of worms I'm opening, but
no, I know exactly what you mean though.
Yeah. Like, you can't be that guy and then also make sick bangers. Cause like, there's a lot of time spent indoors that is required,
Well, and I think it's also like, how do you self-identify? How do you look at yourself? And then how do you sort of like gel that with what the world sees, because there's plenty of great DJs who are maybe DJs first and producers second, but still make great tunes. But,
totally.
But then you can also, like, you can see the reverse of what you're talking about, where there's maybe some great performers who are maybe a little resentful that they have to produce music. And you can kind of tell that too,
For sure.
Or that they're kind of doing it as an afterthought. So to me, it's all about like, how do you feel inside? What about what you do makes you happy or makes you feel fulfilled? And then
right, and that's exactly what I think I kind of realized throughout the pandemic, and then coming out of it was like, I think the best way to figure it out is like, if you hit the lottery tomorrow and you got $600 million, let's say, what are you going to do? Because there are definitely some people out there, like, I mean, a great example would be Tiesto. Like, the dude has essentially won the lottery. You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't have to work ever anymore.
No,
he doesn't. And like, he's been a close friend of ours for a while, and we had all the kids meet a few months ago, and I was just sitting there talking to him, and I was like, dude, like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like,
this guy, I was literally just talking about him specifically in this context like a couple weeks ago.
And it's crazy because like, for him, it's like he's had like a 20-something year career, and he's the biggest he's ever been, dude. Putting out the biggest records, playing the biggest shows, like whatever. And it's like, yeah, for sure. Like, you have to capitalize on that. But I was like, you could do 20 shows a year. You could just play in Vegas. You could do like 4 festivals. You could call it a day. But for someone like him, I'm not going to put words in his mouth or like, try to paraphrase what his actual answer was to me, because at this point, I don't even remember what he really said. But the point is, someone like him or a Diplo, and there's a lot of other examples, but like those guys who like, they could just like pull the plug tomorrow and they'd be good forever, and their kids would be good forever. They genuinely love it. And like they, like to the point where they wouldn't know how to identify without it.
That's the thing. I think about that all the time. Yeah.
And for me, if I won the lottery tomorrow, I'm playing 5 shows a year.
Yeah.
I'm sitting at home. I'm making tunes. I'm, doing the things that I enjoy doing, hanging out with my family, playing video games, going outside and fucking, doing old man sport things like fucking pickleball and golf and whatever. Nice. And like just living my life. And then every now and then going and playing a show and fulfilling that kind of, innate urge and desire that I do have. Like, I think we all do for sure, but mine is not like theirs. You know what I mean? Like, and at some point, I think it was probably when I was like 15, 16, and then beginning of my career, 20, 21, 22, like that was all I wanted to do. That was it. And, I think at this point now I'm just like, okay, like I love playing shows. It's awesome. Connecting with fans is amazing. It's also it's like the most incredible thing of all time that's what I get to do to make a living.
Yeah.
Right. Like by no means am I, not appreciative and understanding of what a fortunate position I'm in. But at the same time, I've also recognized that like, it's not the thing that I'm dying to do every single day anymore. Like, whereas, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, like, making sure my suitcase was never unpacked was like, that was like a badge of honor. You know what I mean? Or like being like, oh man, I'm only home 1 week for the next 3 months. Like that sounded like the concept of that was so exciting. Whereas now it's like, yeah, like, you know, I play shows on the weekend and then I get to go home and I get to be with my kid and I get to spend time with my family and I get to do the things that I love and I get to, you know, work on music, which is like, you know, I guess it's coming full circle.
Yeah, dude, of course. Of course. I mean, were you like a performer when you were a kid? Like, were you the kid who was always, you know, trying to get people to watch them or do something, get on stage somehow?
No, not really. But like, I mean, I was always like the music, or I was always like musically inclined, I guess. Like when I was like 5 or 6, I remember like being somewhere with my mom in Chicago and just being like, yeah, like I'm going to be in sync. Like I'm going to do it. He was like, all right, like, are you going to learn how to play the piano? And I was like, fuck no. I probably didn't say that exactly at 6 years old. I hope not. But, you know, but like I was convinced like that's what I was going to do. Like I was going to be in a group. Like, I mean, at that point, I probably thought I was going to be in the NSYNC.
Of course.
You know,
it could still happen.
I mean, at this point, I'm good. But then that progressed to like, you know, middle school. I was super into rap and wearing fucking whatever Master P's all velour jumpsuit company was. I can't remember what that shit was called. And I was like, yeah, like I'm going to be a rapper, because what white kid from the suburbs doesn't want to be a rapper?
Right.
And then in end of middle school, high school, I got into rock and metal and playing guitar. And I was like, okay, like this is something I can actually do for real. And that's when I got really serious. And I was like, I'm going to be in a rock band. I'm going to travel the world in a fucking van and like play shows and like whatever. And that's really when the dream manifested of like, you know, going out there and being on these massive stages in front of crazy crowds and doing the things that I, you know, get to do now and would kind of call mundane, I guess, at this point.
Yeah, it's weird to say that, but I know exactly what you mean, because yeah, it's a hard thing, because when you're up there, of course, you still appreciate it and it's still mind-blowing every time, but it also does become, the second you leave stage, it's like it kind of never happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Or like I'm such a critical person at this point now, especially if I've played a festival before, or even if I haven't, I'm like, fuck, like there's that one dude in the crowd who doesn't look like he's having a good time, or like whatever. Like my mind is not on like, wow, this show is fucking sick. Yeah. Like there are still those moments, like it still happens from time to time for sure, where you just like get lost in the sauce, because it's just the stars align and everything is just like so good all at once. But like, you know, for me, a lot of the times it's like I get off stage and I'm like, fuck, like I didn't play this song, or like this song didn't go over well, or like the this or the that or whatever, instead of being like, damn, like I just like, you know, there's like a good example from this year is like Bonnaroo. Like I'd never have played Bonnaroo. I mean, technically last year I did, but it was not the festival. It was like a side stage after party, whatever. So that was like a big deal for me. Like that's one of the like big major festivals, crossover festivals. Yeah, exactly. And like I got to go there and I'm like looking around. I'm like, wow, this place is fucking sick. And then, you know, the crowd was awesome and everything was great. And I get off stage and I'm like, yeah, that was fucking rad. But most of the time now it's like, you know, either you're worried about ticket sales, or you're worried about like production, or you're worried about your set being right, or you're worried about this, or you're worried about that. And it's just, I lost my train of thought. What was no.
I think what I was going to say to sort of add on to what you're saying is there's maybe a connection back to what we were talking about with the Tiestos and Diplos of the world who can't seem to stop, where it's like, we're all self-critical. And so I think each show in your mind before it happens is like an opportunity to have a better one than you just had. even though the one you just had was probably great, but it's, you know, in your head, you're like, oh, well, we can fix this stuff on the next one and the next one and the next one and the next one. And you never, you're always ahead of yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and it's like all of the, like, every time you set a goal for yourself and you think it's unattainable, the second you attain it, it becomes yesterday's news. And it's like, you know, like, and I think now that I've, you know, not been playing as many shows and spending more time at home and able to be a little bit more introspective, it's like, damn, like I've done, you know, almost every single thing I could have ever wanted to do with a career in music outside of, like, you know, and not that I even want to, especially at this point, but like outside of having like a Grammy or like a Billboard Top 100 record or like, you know, something like that. Like I've played just about every festival I could ever want to play. I've been to almost every continent, every country within reason. Like I've done a lot of shit, you know. It's like I have a lot to be grateful for. And, you know, kind of realized that, like, while it was all happening, I never really took a second to kind of like take it all in. But I think that there's like a defense mechanism that your body has, not everyone's, but, you know, people who are successful in our world there, you kind of have to have that, like, nothing is ever good enough mentality, because if it is good enough, then that's all you're ever going to get.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, you know, for me, God, when was the first time I think the first time I did the Bill Graham in San Francisco, which is like, you know, growing up, that's the most legendary venue. Like that was like where Swedish House Mafia played. And that's where like fucking Metallica played. And that's where, you know, all these,
cause you grew up in Marin, right? So you were, I would assume like you would go there to see shows as a kid.
Never went.
Oh, wow.
Never went. Yeah, I like, and I guess this kind of touches back on the whole kind of homebody thing, is like, you know, even when I got into dance music, like I never went to shows because I was just so focused on like learning how to make the music, you know. I used to go to tons of metal shows in the city, like when I was in high school, but that was like the Regency Ballroom, like kind of just smaller, sweatier fucking music venues or metal venues on like a Tuesday night, you know. But I always knew, like, you know, there the two like Northern California bucket list fucking things are like Outside Lands and the Bill Graham. And 2016 I got to do Outside Lands, and I was like, holy shit, this is crazy. And then at Outside Lands they were like, hey, you're going to do the Bill Graham in like 5 months from now. And I was like, huh? And they were like, yeah, no, it's going to be great. Like we're going to announce it like basically right after this show. And it's going to be crazy. And I was like, there's no fucking way that this is going to work. And to make a really long story short, it worked.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, that could have been my, like, you know, headlining Bill Graham, sold out 4 months in advance. I had Too Short and E40 there as special guests, like the ultimate Bay Area, like fucking wet dream, right? And like that could have been it. That could have been like, all right, I've peaked. Like, you know, let's call it a day. And that could have been all I ever did. But the second that show was over, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
Which sucks, but it's also, you know, like a necessity to have that like drive to keep pushing forward, you know?
Yeah, man. I mean, I feel like there has to be a balance, right? Because you got to enjoy it while it's happening to some extent, or otherwise, like, what's the point of any of it? But you're right that I think if you get too comfortable at any point, that's sort of when people can lose the plot. And we see that happen all the time to various artists.
I think I don't really want to put him on blast, but like he also films his house literally all the fucking time. So whatever. I was thinking about this the other day. A while ago, I went to Aoki's house in Vegas, and it's like, you don't really see a lot, like, you know, people who have like pictures of themselves all over their walls.
Right.
And Steve, from at least what I can recall, had a lot of pictures of him from shows and whatever. And I was like, man, that's kind of crazy. Like, that's like a lot of pictures of yourself. Like, I feel like I'd feel weird looking at myself. And now I think about it because I have this new house that, like, you know, we haven't really put any art up on the walls or anything. And I'm like, fuck, man, like, I get it. Like, you know, you get to look at those pictures and be like, oh, yeah, I remember that show. Or like, I've done some pretty fucking cool shit in my life. And it's not really like, it's not for anyone else. It's not like a braggadocious, like, you know, oh, yeah, come to my house and look at all the pictures of how fucking sick I am.
Right.
But it's like kind of like a reminder to yourself to be like, hey, like, this is who you are. And like, this is how you got here. And
yeah.
like,
So, I mean, it's like the idea of like a trophy room or something, you know, where, there's whatever
same
way,
concept.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think whatever way you can sort of get your brain back around to sort of being in the moment and connecting with why you do what you do. I don't think there's a problem with, you know, however anybody does it. I mean, Aoki's another interesting one because he's another one who definitely can't ever stop. And I think will do this until he is physically unable to do it. But then he's also...
Which is going to be never. If you watch his fucking social... Like, everything he does is, you know, engineering himself to be the world's oldest DJ.
Dude, I had him on this podcast. One of my proudest moments, I asked him if he was afraid of death. And he was like, of course. He like flipped out. He was like, yeah, that's like the only thing I'm afraid of. He's like, everything I do in my life is like running from death.
For sure.
Yeah. It's just fascinating,
I think if you don't have a little bit of that in you,
I don't know. I don't know that I do, really. I mean, I don't want to die, but
Willy, I'm gonna ask you this question again in like 15 years, and we'll see how you feel.
I mean,
you'll
please,
be a lot closer to the door.
Well, because we're all changing all the time, but I don't know, man. I feel like I was more afraid of it when I was younger. I feel like these days, it's not that I don't want it to happen, and I want to live a long life, but I don't know, man. I feel like I'm less scared of it than I used to be.
I go in waves where like I just either don't think about it at all, or I have one of those like existential crises where like I start to think about the fact that like there's going to be a point where this existence that we're experiencing right now is going to shut off like a computer.
Yeah.
And then like you start thinking what happens after that. And you're like, there's no way. Like, I'm not a religious person by any means.
Yeah.
But
we talked about this last time. We're both bad Jews.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I will say, like, it's hard for me to imagine. And, you know, this is because I'm a cog in the simulation right now. But like, it's hard to wrap your head around the concept of anything else being possible other than like you shut your eyes in this life and then all of a sudden you're booted back up.
Right.
And you just forget that it ever happened, you know? Like, that's the only thing that makes sense to me, just because like being a sentient being is like this, like,
yeah, it's all we know how to do.
Yeah. So when I like, even just talking about it now, I'm going to start getting
spinning out.
It's either that or that I just threw a Zyn in my mouth and the nicotine is starting to get to my brain, or a combination of the two. But these are the things that start going. And then I'm just like, I never want to find the answer.
I know what you mean. I guess for me, like, I hear you on all of that. And I have those thoughts too. Like, to me, reincarnation is sort of a scary thought. I think for some people, it's like a pleasant thought. I kind of find it scary because I feel like I got pretty lucky with the life I have.
Yeah, no, I don't even go down that rabbit hole, because yes, when you think about it that way, you're 100% right.
But like, let me say
we're going to be reincarnated as fucking rats, dude.
Oh,
it's
dude,
gonna suck.
100%. Although if we were rats, it wouldn't be that long. You know, you're not a rat that long. Rats live like a year or two, you know?
Yeah. Or maybe I'd be all right with like a fly, like something that has like a 6-hour shelf life, and then it's just like on to the next thing.
Pretty much. Yeah. And, you know, there's like, they say there's no higher thought going on there. So then it's just all instinct. You know, I think you'd have a lot less time to like be an anxious fly. You know what I mean? Like,
oh,
you're just
man,
a fly.
I'm going to start having a panic attack on the Willy
Okay,
Joy
let me bring you back down. This is what I was going to say, man, because I think thinking about this kind of shit for me, it makes me anxious in one way, but it also calms me down in the present moment because I start realizing all the shit I'm worrying about day to day. I'm like, oh, none of this matters. Like,
yeah, that part is even worse to me. You know what I mean?
It doesn't like de-stress you because I don't know, useless. Man. I see so many like to talk about music specifically. I see so many artists worried about like, oh, my legacy and the next goal that I'm trying to reach and all that. And to me, I'm like, well, all of that is going to be forgotten on a long enough timeline. So it's like, are you having fun doing what you're doing? It's like, it's a very simple yes or no answer.
That's fair. But in their defense, if you don't have that mentality, then why do anything, dude?
Everybody needs a reason. You're right about that.
That's the thought process that leads you to being like a fucking strung out drifter in Skid Row in LA. And you're just like, dude, none of this shit matters. Let's load up and have a good time, and then it's all going to end.
I hear you, but what I'm saying is less about like nihilism and more about like refocusing priorities, where it's to me less about like the material achievements or like getting to the next rung, and it's more about, am I enjoying what I'm doing? You know, like totally. If you look at it like that, where it's just like me working super hard and making an album and going on tour. I do it because it's fun and it improves my life in XYZ ways. Great, you know?
And you know what?
Yeah.
Let's bring it full circle. That's exactly how Aoki and Diplo and Tiesto and those guys are. That is the thing that fulfills them, right? Not that like, you know, I've seen Tice as a dad. He's a great dad. Like, you know, he loves his family and he loves spending time with them and he brings them everywhere. And you know, it's not like he's like, you know, all of these people are second to me in my music and my career, but that is the thing that, you know, gives them life.
Yeah.
And to really bring it full circle, I think that's the realization that I had is like, that's a part of it, but that's not it.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
and tell me if I'm wrong, when you sort of lean into the other parts of your life and your identity, don't you think it makes the music part of your identity better too, you know?
For sure. I mean, I think that there's like this vicious cycle that, you know, the fans don't really get to see that happens to every single artist. It's like, you know, I watch it happen every year, but it's like, you're this like hungry kid in your parents' basement or some shitty apartment, and you're just dreaming of being out there on the road playing your music for people. And then you hit that, you know, that fucking moment and your career takes off and everything is great and hunky dory and things are just happening. Boom, 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 boom. And then you get to the point where you're touring so much and you're spread so thin and you don't have any time to recover or reinvigorate yourself with things outside of just, I'm a DJ who goes and plays clubs and festivals and shows and whatever. Like, you hit a wall and you can't make music anymore that means fucking anything. And I don't mean that all music has to be substantive. I don't know how to say that.
Yeah.
You know, that's actually probably, and I don't know if I've ever talked about this in an interview or a podcast or anything. And I think it's something that's important to remind myself of a lot of the time, but also is probably a good little nugget of wisdom for people that are trying to do, you know, this whole thing is, I remember when I first started getting into electronic music and, you know, I decided, okay, I'm going to be I'm going to be a DJ. Like, that's what I'm going to do. And I was like, I was also probably getting to the age where I started realizing how fucked up the world was and there's all these issues and whatever. And, you know, I idolized bands like Rage Against the Machine and System of a Down who, like, you know, they use their music and their platform to try to affect world change and all this shit. Red Hot Chili Peppers, whatever. And I was like, I'm just going to be some fucking dude just playing stupid fucking music at these parties that it has no substance and it has no meaning and whatever. But I kind of realized and convinced myself that, you know, being that person to provide kids with an escape and just be able to unleash whatever it is they need to get off their chests is an equally important role to fulfill in the grand scheme of things.
100%.
You know, and you know, I've had to remind myself of that a lot of times, because it's like, you know, I'll think back to like the records that kind of got me to where I am, and I'm like, none of them mean fucking anything. They don't really have lyrics. Like they're, you know, I mean, just to be bleak about it, like they're not going to stand the test of time. Like if someone picked it up in 100 years, they're going to be like, what the fuck is this? Versus like, you know, like a Jimi Hendrix record or a fucking Beatles album or whatever, you know, like those things will last for, I would say, thousands of years, as long as people, even if people don't understand English as a language anymore, like it'll be around for centuries. But you know, I kind of have to remind myself, like, that's okay. Like, it is okay to be that person. And I think that's a good segue to the album that is, you know, inevitably coming out here in the next few weeks. When I did the first Wise and Wicked album, I think that was my like, I'm going to prove a point that I have more substance to myself than just being some guy that makes EDM records and whatever. And like looking back on a lot of those records now, like that's exactly what they are to me, right. You know, like most of them. So this trip around the sun, when I was kind of, you know, I was like, okay, like I think there's a right way to kind of go about these albums to both kind of re-fulfill that need that I have to make substantive music, but also like recognize that like the stuff that's just for, you know, having a good time or going hard or whatever is equally as important. So I tried not to put as much emphasis on the, you know, the cinematic world building, yada, 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 whatever. And I was just like, all right, you know, for this album specifically, because this is, you know, the Wicked album, the super heavy fucking aggro shit. Yeah. I was like, all right, like most of these records, like they don't need to be these fucking masterpieces of, you know, cinematic genius. Not that I have that in me, you know, but like whatever that would mean to me, like they don't need to be that. Like a lot of these records can just be fucking bangers.
Yep. And
ironically, you know, I mean, the first single that came out, Mind Control, is like exactly that. You know, it's just a fucking, I wrote it as an intro for my sets when I was going back on tour. And I was like, let's just make something heavy as fuck that kids hear and are like, oh, wow, this is crazy. And that's what it was. And there's a lot of those records on this album, but there are also a couple that people will hear that, like, you know, to me, they're ironically like have a lot more substance than I thought they would.
Of course, dude. I think it's funny. I talk about this in different ways on this podcast a lot, where it's like, as a producer, if you approach something like writing a new song with this elaborate concept in your mind, it's almost always going to be worse and not what you wanted than if you start with a very simple idea that's kind of just like a spark of inspiration, and you just follow that with no expectations. Like 99% of the time, you'll get a better result that way. It's crazy.
Yeah. And that's the way the first album in 2018 and these two albums, the Wise or Rise of the Wise that came out, like 2 months ago now.
Yeah.
And this album came together is like, it wasn't that I sat down and was like, okay, like, here's what I'm doing. How do I make these records that like I have this like faint image of in my head? It was much more, for the Wise album, it was like I have like 45 songs sitting around that all have this kind of same cohesive energy and emotion and feeling. And then for this album, it was the same thing. Like I have all these, you know, kind of bangers sitting around, and it's like, how do I shape these into, you know, cohesive packages that represent what I want them to represent? Because every time I've tried, whether it's an album or an EP or even just a single, and I'm like, I want to make a song that does this.
Yeah, never.
Not once, dude.
When I like to that you're doing this tour you have coming up where you're doing like dual shows, like 2 shows in 2 days in each city, doing different theme nights. I thought that was really smart. I think that's like, it's a great use of your powers. You know what I mean? Like you're at the point as an artist where you can do that. To me, it's super smart. Have you done that before? Like when you did the last album, were you doing those kind of like dual shows?
No, it's my whole kind of ethos for a long time, and still to this day, is like when you get a Jauz show, like you're going to get a little bit of everything. You kind of have to expect the unexpected, so on and so forth. As a product of me being around and making as much music as I have over the last like 9-10 years, it's like, you know, like, for example, I did North Coast in Chicago this last weekend, and I had a 60-minute set. And it's like, okay, like I have X, Y, and Z songs that I have to play every Jauz set. Otherwise, like, what the fuck am I doing here?
Yeah, you'll hear about it.
Then there's like the songs that you want to play in the set because they're great for a festival. And then there's the songs, you want to play because they're, you know, the unreleased ones that you only get to hear when I play them at a show. And then there's all the new songs from this upcoming album that I want to make sure I play. And it's like, how the fuck do you fit all that into 60 minutes?
Right.
You know, like it's tough. And then especially like as my tastes and palette kind of, broadened from what would be like a central point, even though I always made everything, now it's like really kind of like, expanded across the spectrum, so to speak. It got to the point where it's like, how do I play this kind of music and this kind of music in the same show without it like feeling really weird?
Yeah.
And I think I started to really recognize that when I did the tour in 2020, right before COVID, where I was like, okay, I'm going to go from like the heaviest dubstep of all time to like essentially like tech house.
Right.
Like, like I pull it off sometimes and like it works and it's cool, but like I kind of realized, not even just for the fans, but really just for me, like being able to have these more curated experiences where I can really like dive into each of these different worlds that are all still under the same umbrella. That was the one thing that I really wanted to avoid, is like, okay, you can make a side project, but like that defeats the whole purpose of the Jauz project. It's
right.
Like, it was supposed to be everything under the sun under one moniker. So it's like, for me to be the goal is to be able to create these worlds that, in a perfect world, a quote unquote true Jauz fan, let's say, would see like, okay, there's a Wise show and there's a Wicked show. They're going to be completely different, but like I'm here for both. They're two totally different experiences. Like one night it's like, all about just like vibing and like being in the moment. And like, this is a whole other thing that I really don't want to spend a bunch of time getting into, but like you see all these videos from like Fisher and Chris Lake and all these like house music guys where these crowds are going fucking bananas over whatever song it is. But like what you don't see is the other 85% of that set. Most people are kind of just standing around and like vibing and having a good time in their own kind of space. And that's exactly what, to me, what house music is supposed to elicit, is like this like constant journey of like, just like being in the moment and not worrying about putting your hands in the air, not worrying about riding the rail and whatever. Cause like, you're just like, you're feeling it. You know what I mean? So there's like, and there's a time and a place for that. right? And that is kind of what got so difficult for me, is like, how do you try to elicit those feelings in like a 15-minute section and then go straight back into some crazy shit?
Yeah, of course. I've thought about this too, man. I think the only other way you could do it would be playing super long, extended sets every night.
I've contemplated that too, but maybe that's something for the maybe that's something for the future. That is something I've seriously thought about.
Me too. Yeah, me too, man. Because I mean, I have a similar tendency to you, where like I appreciate a lot of different sounds, and I can, in my head, I can see how they can all connect, but then actually making it happen in a short period of time is a real balancing act.
Yeah, because like let's say you're playing a 75-minute set or even a 90-minute set at a festival, right? And you want to kind of take people on that trip, which would be you start at the houseier side of things, and then you progressively build up crazier and crazier and crazier. Like, you don't have enough time to do that.
Yeah.
Like, and not only that, but like whoever's on stage before you, 9 times out of 10 is going to play, their biggest, bangerest record at the end of their show.
Exactly.
And like, kids don't want to be taken down and then up again and down and then up again and then down and then up again. And like, I mean, I do that in the middle of my sets.
Right.
But like, they want to be started off with a bang and they want to have that wow effect.
Well, and that's part of it too. Like, you have to strike a balance for that too, of, doing something that's artistically fulfilling and interesting to you, but also if nobody else connects to what you're doing, then what's the point, right? So you gotta, like, there's a give and take with the audience. And
then I guess to kind of touch on what the Wicked show would be, because I've made it kind of clear, like, what the Wise show is, I've always played a lot of like, super heavy records in my sets, but I feel like that there is like this probably sizable portion of my fan base that, like, for lack of a better word or a better way to say it, like, that's all they want to hear. Yeah. They don't really care about hearing the big, vocals and the pop records and whatever, like, because in a normal Jauz set, I'm going to splice in everything. I'm going to play, crowd pleasers that, tie into my own music. I'm going to play underground stuff. I'm going to play, shit from left all the way to right. So the Wicked show is kind of like my opportunity to be like, okay, like, I'm just going to go turbo mode for however long the sets end up being. I don't really know. I haven't looked at the show contracts or anything, whether it's 75 minutes or 90 minutes or whatever, like, it's just going to be like, it's going to be on from start to finish. I'd like to think that both of these, kind of new curated worlds, so to speak, are things that like fans of mine have kind of, I guess, hoped for in each way. But at the end of the day, maybe not. But my goal is to make that, very much so a thing. Is like, okay, cool. Like, let's use, I don't know, EDC as an example. Like, you could, one day go to the fucking Neon Garden or whatever stage it is, and see the Wise set and like have that experience. The next day you go to the Bass Pod, get the full Wicked experience, dubstep, drum and bass, Bangerville, USA. And then the third day, whatever stage I play on, I play the real Jauz set, and you get to hear the records from the beginning to the end that are like the quintessential Jauz records.
Yeah.
And that, like, that fully combined experience, because they are 3 completely different things, and they're 3 different things that I've always been able to do. I just haven't really had a space for the other 2 for a long time, and I've just tried to fit them into this one bubble.
Well, and I think it's smart, man. It's like doing something like this, I think is a good thing for any artist who's been around for a while to consider, because I mean, what you're basically doing is you're giving people who like you as an artist it's like handing them a menu. It's letting them order what they want. You know what I mean? Because if I think about
there's issues with that too, though.
Well, let me just finish. Because
what if you find out? Yeah, go ahead.
Well,
go ahead.
All I was going to say is, like, if I think about bands that I love or artists that I love, of course I have a favorite album or a favorite era of those artists. Where if they were doing that, I would be so stoked and like go out of my way to see it and participate in it, as opposed to, you know, sometimes you don't evolve the same time as the artist you love. And then you're like, I don't, you know, what, this last album just wasn't for me, that kind of thing. Giving people the option to like lean into whatever they like about you. I think it's smart, man. It makes sense to me.
I totally agree. But there's also a part of me that's like, well, fuck, what if I realize that all of my fans only like dubstep and then no one comes to the Wise shows and they all just want to go to that show?
But that's just insecurity, man. You know, people are going to show up.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think so. And it's like, I think the other, you know, one benefit to having just the Jauz show in the past is like kids are kind of forced to listen to stuff that because that's always been a big goal of mine, is like to help, you know, expand fans' horizons past what they're comfortable with. Yeah. Right. So, you know, maybe they come in and they want to hear the big banger or fucking whatever. And then they also get 20 minutes of, you know, weird house music. And at the time they're like, oh, this is fucking lame. But then a year from now, the seeds planted in their brain and they're like, oh, that was actually pretty tight. And now I've grown up a little bit and I realized that like sometimes there is a place for just like going and having a good time and not having fucking dubstep blared in my face for 90 minutes straight, you know? Yeah. I mean, it happened to me.
Sure, of course. You know? Of course. Everybody's tastes change, you evolve as a person, all of that, man. It's all valid. But I mean, what I like about what you're doing, dude, is you're trying different approaches to it, you know? And we were just talking about approaches you haven't even tried yet. And I feel like as long as you sort of stay on the hunt for like the presentation of these ideas that feels the best to you, that's all you can really ask, you know?
Yeah. And that's the goal, is like, you know, I guess kind of to tie it back to the overarching, you know, theme and topic of what we've been talking about, is like, if I just kept doing the Jauz show over and over again and trying to reinvent the wheel there, it's like, how many more times can you reinvent it before you're just like, what the fuck is the point anymore?
Diminishing returns. Yeah.
And it's like, as much as I've said, you know, I don't like touring anymore and I just want to stay at home and be a fucking homebody. Like I still, you know, I do love it. You know, I love playing the shows and I love putting on, you know, an experience for fans and going out and, you know, doing the whole thing. And otherwise I wouldn't bother doing this shit. It's much more difficult than just going out there and putting up some shows that, you know, people have kind of come to expect and anticipate. Yeah. You know, like it's honestly kind of stupid to go out there and try to reinvent the wheel after, you know, doing something for 10 years. It doesn't really make much sense, but like, that's who I am. And that's like, it's what I felt like needed to be done for me at this point. And, you know, it'll hopefully end up, you know, turning into something really, really beautiful and something really cool that I get to expand on for years to come. And it'll just keep me, you know, forced to keep flying around playing shows, even if I, you know, just want to sit at home with my dogs and my kid and my wife.
Yep. Well, there's got to be the balance, man. And I think to bring back something we were saying earlier, you're making yourself uncomfortable a little bit. You're not letting it sort of just sit there forever, which I think that's the only way to progress as a person, even if it's painful or even if it doesn't always lead to the right place immediately. That's the only way we get anywhere, you know? Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of crazy the how much the landscape of music has changed from, you know, or like I almost feel like it's kind of come full circle. Cause like at the beginning of my career, when I first started working with Mo, all we really did was, and even before I started working with Mo, it was just like, put out a fucking song every 2 weeks, put it up on the internet. Eventually someone will like something.
Right.
And then for a while it was like, you know, you get so precious with music and you're like, unless it's the fucking banger to change the universe, don't bother putting it out, because quantity means nothing over quality anymore.
Right.
And now with the way that music is, it's like, it's completely reverted to like,
it's true.
Just put stuff out as much as you can, as fast as you can, because if you don't, people are going to forget about it in 2 weeks or less.
Yeah. Yeah. Which
is like,
yeah,
it's empowering and it's debilitating at the same time.
That's all I was going to say too. Yeah. There's pluses and minuses. In a way, it's like, it's great because you don't have to be so precious about your ideas and you can kind of just throw them out there without, you know, getting too anxious about it. But yeah, of course it's depressing that we're all just...
Which would, again, while I'm just talking shit on myself, that would be the smart thing to do, is take however many songs, you know, I've had on these albums and just put them out as singles one week after another, over and over and over again. But that's just not really the way I do things, because I have to make things hard on myself. So, you know,
but I mean,
it's
you're doing something right, man. I mean, like we were saying before,
I appreciate it.
Those moments of reflection when you realized all the things you've been able to do. Clearly, whatever your tendencies are, you've sort of figured out a way to make them work for you. And I mean, one thing I wanted to say to you too, man, like earlier you were talking about sort of the legacy and how, you know, your songs, like, are they going to stand the test of time, like Jimi Hendrix and all that? The argument I want to make to you is that I to me, that's all perspective too, because, you know, sure, take a Jimi Hendrix song that people are still studying hundreds of years later in the future. That's great, but like, he's not here to appreciate that that's happening. So to me, it's like what you're doing, you're creating these spaces that you were talking about, right? Where people can come and get stuff out and have a release and all that. Those are real time experiences. And everybody who's there having those experiences, they're going to remember those experiences and it's going to change them in the present. And you're still around to share those memories. To me, it's like, why isn't that just as valuable as somebody talking about a song you made 100 years from now?
No, you're 100% right. And again, that's like kind of the thing that I had to like self-realize, you know, when I first started doing all this stuff, is like that is okay. Like, to just have songs and be that person that, like, you know, just creates that freeing environment, or just be the fucking party guy. I mean, look at fucking John Summit, dude. That's I mean, I say that, but then he has these amazing records with huge vocals that are melodic, he's a very good producer. Yeah. But you know, for all intents and purposes, he's the party guy. Fisher too, great example. Like, they're the party guy. You want to go to their shows because their aura just makes you want to, like, forget about all the bad shit and just enjoy yourself, right? Like, at the end of the day, like, you know, it could be, their personalities on Instagram are so exciting and whatever, but it's really, like, when you boil it down, it's people are gravitating towards their, like, carefree personalities because they want to absorb some of that for themselves, even if it's just for an hour, or if it's, you know, in their cases, 7-hour set, whatever it is, you know? So it's like, you know, there is something incredibly, you know, valuable in being able to provide that to people. And I would say at this point, you know, for myself, like, I probably, like, I see, you know, like, when I go put on, like, a real quote unquote Jauz show at, like, a real venue with real tickets and real production and whatever, like, I feel like that is a little bit more, I try to make it more substantial than just like a, hey, come party and, like, get loose and whatever. But again, like, that's also kind of the genesis of why this tour was born. It's like, you know, not necessarily as serious as something like that, where it is like, it's kind of just all about the party, whether it's the wise side where it's, you're just like going to some dark fucking underground club to listen to sick house music and lose yourself for a couple hours, or you're going to the dubstep show where you're going to ride the rail and jump in a mosh pit and get buck wild,
Yeah.
So I think that is exactly, maybe without even realizing it. Thanks, Willy. Maybe what the ethos behind this tour was.
It's beautiful, man. It's great, man. I think this is going to be a great tour. I think you're going to have a great time, and I'm stoked to hear about it after you do it. But B, man, it's also the music's really good. I mean, I feel like all the records I've heard, man, are fucking great. I feel like you've never been a bad producer, but I feel like you really have kind of zeroed in on, I don't know, it just sounds polished and effortless.
I mean, like we were talking about before, it's like, you don't have time to like kind of learn when you're touring 85% of the year. You know, it's like, it doesn't matter how old you are or how long you've made music. Like if you're not learning, it is going to reflect in your music, because it's going to sound exactly the fucking same.
Yeah.
And that's, I guess, that's another big reason that I kind of went in this direction with the albums and the shows, is like the Jauz project, when I look at it, has always been, the old ethos of music has no boundaries, and, making all these different kinds of music. And then at a certain point, through no fault of my own, and I'm also not going to complain about it because it's probably why I'm here right now, a certain style of music that I made kind of caught fire. And that was, for a lot of people, all they really knew about me.
Yeah.
Right. I was the quote unquote bass house guy. And just because of what a stubborn fuck I am, I immediately was like, that is not me. I'm going to do everything in my power to distance myself from that notion as quickly as I can. And, I think still at the end of the day, like, regardless of what kind of music I put out anymore, it's like, each fan has their own interpretation of, I want to hear like the classic Jauz sound. Like, I don't want to hear this. Like, when I put out a heavy record, some kids are like, oh no, I want to hear the old Jauz that made house music, that made like cool UKG, like kind of like inspired stuff. And then I put out some stuff like that, and they're like, oh no, I want to hear the Jauz that was putting out dubstep back in 2014. And then I put out that stuff again, and they're like, oh no, I want to hear the Feel the Volume, Rock the Party guy. But for me, it was like, the more that I kind of stuck to that lane, specifically the bass house kind of stuff, I could feel myself hitting this plateau where it got to the point where like, I literally could not make a single fucking song that I was like, oh, this is cool. I was like, all of this is ass. And there's people out there doing it at a level so much, like whether it's Joyride or ISO or Knock 2 or any of these kids that are like, taking that genre and kind of like really like gearing it up a notch. Like I'd way rather play fucking Dash Star in my sets than some random fucking bass house thing that I try to make nowadays. Cause like I've at least back at that point when a lot of this music was being written, I had like exhausted that from the tank,
right, 100%.
Like this was a great way for me to be like, okay, here's all the music that excites me right now. Like all this like really housey kind of melodic, techie, whatever you want to call it, stuff that I've, been writing and collecting over the course of however many years, but I was too afraid to put out because I was the bass house guy. And then, all of this stuff that is, heavy and sick, but like maybe it felt a little too underground for like a single release as Jauz for a long time. I think that's another thing that I kind of came to terms with, is I found myself, and I think I still find myself in this gray area where I'm too commercial for the underground and I'm too underground for commercial.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Oh, of course.
That was a really tough place to try to navigate, because it's like, if you try to go and just be like, all right, well, fuck it, I'm just going to go try to make pop songs now and be the next Marshmello. Like, it's a quick hike off the cliff.
Oh yeah. Just gone. Not to mention, I don't think you'd have a good time doing it, you know?
No, not at all. It's not who I am. And if it happens naturally and I end up shitting out a song that, you know, blows the fuck up, then great. But the flip side of that is, like, if I try to be like so underground and so cool, then like, it'll probably feel like I'm trying too hard. And then a lot of these fans that do kind of like, you know, the sing along stuff and the more, you know, accessible, you know, sets and the more accessible music and whatever it is, even though I don't really have very much accessible music.
I think that depends on who's listening.
Yeah. What I would quantify as accessible, right? If I try to steer too far away from that, then it's like you're alienating a whole other side of your fan base. So I was just like, you know what? At this point, it's like, I have to do what makes me happy. And, you know, people on the internet can say whatever the fuck they want about any of the music, and it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, I'm going to put out the stuff that has been exciting me. And eventually they'll either come around or they won't. And that is what it is. As long as at the end of the night, I can like go to sleep and be like, okay, I did, you know, what felt right to me, then it's all good.
Dude, of course. And that's like a very mature, very correct attitude to have. That's like the only attitude that matters.
It took a while to figure out.
I mean, sure, but you know, it takes us all.
I had to turn 30 and have a child, but I got there eventually.
Man, I mean, this is kind of just like last thoughts, but one thing that did occur to me the other day, totally unrelated, but it also made me think of you, as I was like thinking about the current climate of music and dance music and, you know, all the trends that are happening and all the shit we've been talking about of like what works artistically and who's hot and all that. And I don't know why it came into my brain, but I was like, man, Garrett, this would be like the time for Garrett right now. Like if he was here making music now.
He was right there. He was right there. He had it figured out before anyone else did. And I think about it a lot, just because I find it so funny, because he was such a fucking pessimistic fucking...
Very pessimistic.
Just like, you know, like the biggest arguments that we would get into, for people who are, you know, unaware of what Icon Collective is, I guess it's called Icon Collective School of Music now or whatever.
Yeah.
You know,
also for people who are unaware, we're talking about IO, the artist IO.
Yeah. That's a good shout.
Just in case.
So Icon was a school that, you know, a lot of people that, if you listen to this podcast, you probably listen to their music, went to. You know, I went there, Slander, Keizo, Nightmare, IO, Company, Prototype, Mac J, fucking, you know, the list goes on, just cranks out amazing producers. But one of the, you know, kind of pillars that Icon is built around is the Art of Flow, which is the class that really teaches you the mentality of not just being a music producer or a DJ, but like a creative person in general. Yeah. And it's a little foo-foo and it's a little heady. But like, as a person who's not really, you know, religious, it spoke to me a lot, and a lot of it really made sense to me. And Garrett was the polar opposite, and he hated it. He used to get into arguments with the teachers all the time in class. And like, we would just sit there and fucking bicker about it. We never fought about anything, but anytime something related to that was brought up, we would literally like almost get into screaming matches about it because he thought I was so fucking dumb and I thought he was so fucking dumb. And then when like the IO shit started happening, I was like, dude, you realize like you're doing exactly what that class taught. Like you have taken the long road and you've developed your own lane and you're doing exactly what the fuck you want that no one else can really replicate right now in your own way. And like, look at what's happening. And he's like, no, I'm just making weird, stupid music with fucking reverb on my kick drums and whatever. And I was like, yeah, dude, exactly. Like you're just doing whatever the fuck you want. And like, it's working out. Look at that. Like you tried.
Dude, he was one of the rare cases. Like I always talk about when an artist gets bitter, I'm like, once you get bitter, there's no coming back from it, right? Because so many people, like, if it just doesn't work out fast enough or something goes wrong, people get bitter and then they never find their way back. He was one of the very few where, like, I think he did hit that bitter point for a second. And then it was almost like,
oh, no, it wasn't for a second. It was
no, you're right. It was for a long time. But even while he was having success, it was funny because you could see him like fighting his own bitterness. Like he kind of knew, like, some part of him knew that bitter part was kind of wrong, but he still just like couldn't let it go.
The really ironic thing to me is like the bitterness like became part of his brand. You know what I mean? Like his complete contempt for everything and anything that was like remotely cool.
Yeah.
Or like whatever, like that became like his calling card, and
including
like
himself.
Kind of, it's almost like
like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like even when he became cool, he hated that, you know?
Yeah. Oh, totally. But the point where he turned around is when he finally basically just got so broken down trying to chase trends and trying to do all these things that weren't genuine to him. And he was just like, literally none of this fucking matters anymore. I might as well just make the weirdest shit I possibly can, which is literally like the textbook fucking art of flow in a bottle.
Right.
But he wouldn't accept the fact that that's what he was doing. And I thought it was so funny. And I would just give him shit for it all the fucking time. But you're totally right. Like,
I mean, if he was around now, this is like the time that was for him. You know what I mean? Like in terms of like,
I would be supporting him on tour.
Yo, for sure. Yeah.
I saw it coming. I was like, dude, like this kid is finally gonna, be on top of the planet where he rightfully deserves to be. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know. It's like, of course, that's how the cookie crumbled,
Yeah, that's life, man. But it's, I don't know, man. And that's the thing. Okay. So this is kind of full circle, everything we've been talking about. What you're talking about with your new album, you've been talking about the creation of it in the same way that we were just talking about IO, where like all of a sudden you're not overthinking it anymore. You're just following instincts, and the result is a fucking great album. And second of all, man, I mean, it's like, we're talking about Garrett, who's gone now, and what do we have? Like, of course we still have his music and it's great music, but like what I focus on is the memories of him and the moments I had with him. Right. And it's like, that's at the end of the day, man, that's what fucking matters. Yeah,
totally. And I mean, I've tried to on as many interviews, podcasts, whatever as I can, but I'll say it here again because it's worth mentioning, especially since we're this is actually, something that I've thought about a lot, that that was, kind of hard for me to overcome personally, not just with these albums, but for a long time, was not from the forefront, but, behind closed doors, I guess. Like Garrett was such an instrumental part of like my music making process. Cause we would literally, essentially we were together every single day. I let him use my studio in downtown when I was renting it. And then I had my loft next to the loft that I lived in that I had turned into a studio. And he was basically there, every single day while I was traveling and when I wasn't traveling. And like the whole first album, like the original Wise and the Wicked, he was there through the, beginning creative process to the very final end of that whole thing. And it's like, without him, that album wouldn't have been a quarter of what it was. And, as shitty as it is to say, because it feels really, self-centered and narcissistic, but like when Garrett first died and I, had gone through the initial shock and grief and tears and all that, I was like, dude, how the fuck am I going to make music again?
Right.
But like seriously. And I had already kind of felt it because I had moved to Orange County during COVID and, I wasn't in the same, 2-mile vicinity of him anymore. But at least, I could send him ideas and we would talk pretty much every day or whatever it was. But yeah, that was like one of the big like hurdles. I was like, he was like a crutch almost of mine that, and not in like a negative way, but like,
like a support system. Yeah.
Yeah. And, like just, someone to bounce ideas off and tell me what was stupid and what wasn't stupid. And even sometimes the things that he said were stupid, I disagreed with him, but at least I had that to be like, okay, if I think that he's wrong, then this must be legit. And like everyone needs that. And everyone who's successful has that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like everyone who's successful in music has some sort of support system, whether it's as simple as a friend that they can rely on to give them, constructive criticism, to a team of people that they work with to make, the songs as great as they can possibly be. Like you don't do it on your own. So I went through a while of, really, kind of being like extra reclusive.
Yeah.
Where I was like, I was so, I guess, I don't know. I've tried to think about it a lot. Like, I think I was so used to having him there that when he wasn't, it was like, I had like a crisis of faith almost in myself as a producer. Like, can I still do this without a Garrett here to kind of like hold my hand through it? And that was like a super gnarly thing to go through. But I think both from like a music standpoint and just like as a human, it's one of those things where it's like, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. But the point of bringing it all up is like, I give him all the credit in the world to, half the music that you hear on the main stages of festivals nowadays, and B, for me still having a fucking career.
Dude. I mean, that's what I was going to say is like, even if he's not here to sort of give you in the moment feedback on ideas, it's like all that time spent with him, I'm sure changed who you are, not just as a person, but as an artist and the way you think about music and all that. And, you'll always have that, like that part of him is always going to be there.
Yeah. Yeah.
For what it's worth, his podcast or his appearance on this podcast, one of the best all time that's ever been on the show. So good.
Yeah.
Yeah. People still talk to me about it.
Yeah. I mean, to really bring it full circle, we're talking about people that, like a Jimi Hendrix or something that leave a legacy. It's like, he's a perfect example. And I mean, who knows what would have happened if he was still here now, but like, that was the one thing that always made me kind of have like some sort of silver lining, is like he was so close to hitting that like his true like stardom that, you know, and he had developed such an intense, incredible fan base that like his music really will live on, like as long as, you know, all this dance music shit does. And
absolutely,
you know, that's one thing that gives me solace. It's, you know, I still see IO merch at shows all the time, and I have kids come up to me and say this or that, you know, about what he was to them. And it's really fucking cool.
Yeah, man. Yeah, we're all sort of part of that cycle, that community, and he'll always be a part of that too, man. There's something comforting about that, where it's like, yeah. I don't even know if I have another thought, but yeah, that's a nice way to think about it, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I don't know. I've put a lot of fucking thought into it, because like I you know, getting to be an adult, you know, which at this point in this generation, I feel like turning 30 now, I really feel like an adult. Or maybe it's just the world that we live in. That was like, you know, for me, one of the like big, like, damn, I'm at that age where like people that I care about who aren't family members, who are 35 years older than me, 40 years, 50 years older than me, are going to, you know, just, this shit is going to start happening. Right. Not naturally, or not like because they're supposed to, but just like it fucking happens. It's something that like I still try to unpack, and it's so fucking crazy that the whole thing happened during COVID. Like, yeah, like I don't know how to say this without sounding like a dick.
That's all right.
But still to this day, I haven't played a single IO song in a set, even the one that I made with him. Just because like I think it would be like, it's probably a fear-based thing, like the reaction that especially at the beginning, like if I tried to do like a tribute something for him on stage, like I don't know like how I would end up.
Yeah.
But also I just have this Garrett in my head that's like, if you fucking use me for a fucking Instagram video, I will haunt you for the rest of your goddamn life.
And you know he would.
And he'd be like, that's so fucking cheesy. I can't believe you would do that. Like, yeah.
But you know what I'll say? Secretly, there would be a small part of him that also loved it, you know?
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. And I guess that was my point, is like, my point in just bringing all of this stuff up about Garrett, and I'm glad that you brought him up, is like, you know, other than, you know, the occasional like birthday or memorial or whatever it is, like I really, you know, have tried to, or not tried, I can't really be as vocal about how much admiration that I, you know, had for him and how much I appreciated him. Just because, like, almost out of respect for him, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, when I die, I hope there's not a bunch of fucking people out there being like, oh, he was my best friend and this and that, and I cared about him so much. Like, but if that's how I feel, I can only imagine for him, right? The most cynical fucking person I ever met in my entire fucking life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to just, you know, God, and he would hate this phrase so much, and I can't believe it's going to come out of my mouth right now because I don't like it either, but give him his flowers.
Give him his flowers, baby. No, of course, man. And thank you for sharing it, man, because obviously he and I were friends, and the experiences we had, the moments we shared, left a big impact on me, but I didn't have the kind of relationship with Garrett that you did. So it's, you know, for me too, like it means a lot hearing your reflections on him. And I think it's good, not that this is any kind of like tribute or anything like that, but I think it's good. You just got to mention him every once in a while, you know?
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's like, you know, especially living in Orange County now and not being like as surrounded by music industry people every single day. Like, I don't have as many opportunities to really talk about him. So, I appreciate getting the, you know, reminder to say something every now and then.
Well, shit, man, I don't know that I have much else to say here. I mean, this has been a great talk. Is there anything else on your mind? Anything else you want to get out there? I mean, we talked about the album, the tour.
Yeah, I think I checked all the management check boxes. Make sure you talk about the albums. Make sure you talk about the tours. If you want to come see me play a show, you can go to jauzofficial.com. All tour dates that are currently live will have ticket links available on that website. I'm not good at all that stuff, you know. I like coming on and just having a conversation. And
I'm the same as you, man. You're a great guest. You're also a great host. I don't know if you're ever going to bring that back, but that was always fun.
I meant to bring that up, but that's kind of, you know, one of the things that that I would really love to do is, like, you know, at a certain point when I'm not touring quite as much and I have some consistency, like I do genuinely miss doing a podcast. I miss being able to have conversations like this with people on a regular basis. You know, it's definitely not something that I thought, like, I mean, who the fuck knew what podcasting was 15 years ago, whatever.
Yeah.
It's definitely something that I would love to revisit in the not so distant future. But aside from that, I think it's fucking awesome that you're still here doing it.
Oh, thanks, man.
Pioneering and waving the flag for all of us. Cause I don't know, it's crazy. I feel like it's such an untapped market. And there's like, I mean, I know Will Clark is killing it now.
Yep. Will Clark's great. There's a couple others. Scuba does a really good one. Tiga does a really good one.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. Tiga's
I wonder if Tiga would want to have me on and talk about when I did that remix of Bugatti for him. And then he asked me for the stems to the remix. And then I never sent them to him. And then I just never talked to him again. And that was like 13 years.
Oh, that's so good. I'm sure he'd love to, man. He's got a good sense of humor about that shit.
Yeah, I would hope so, because I feel like a dick about it still.
No, Tiga's great, man. His is in seasons. So I don't know if he's like running it right now, but I think he just every like 6 months he'll do another season.
If you happen to be listening to this right now, I apologize. I was a young, stupid kid.
That's so funny.
And big fan.
No, Tiga's incredible. Fuck. Now I'm going to feel bad if there's other podcasts. The Lizzie Jane podcast is good. Shout out Lizzie J. And there's a bunch of other ones, man. More people are starting
flowers,
to do it.
Dude.
Yeah. Hey, this is Willy. Now, I never do this, but I'm breaking back into the podcast for a second because I forgot to mention some good podcasts, and man, I just couldn't let it go. Obviously, I got to mention Anna Luno's podcast is incredible, as well as the Brownies and Lemonade podcast that has been fairly new, but going strong. I think they're on 10 or 12 or 15 episodes, something like that, which is called All This Noise, and it is fantastic. Both Chad from Brownies and Lemonade and Valerie Lee, who is the other host on that show, they've both been on this podcast individually, of course, as has Anna Luno. Anyway, I'm rambling, but I had to mention those podcasts. They're amazing. Go check them out. And back to the show.
But I mean, it's fucking tough if you tour. Like, I was fully, you know, like, okay, when touring comes back, like I'm gonna keep Twitch streaming 3 times a week, and I'm gonna keep doing my podcast every single week. And literally after one weekend of shows, I was like, no shot, no fucking shot.
Yeah.
But hopefully the next time that we do this, I will have figured it out, and I'll have my own podcast that I can plug right here.
There you go. I love it, man. Well, and all of this shit aside, dude, it's great to just catch up with you, man. It's been a while.
Yeah, likewise.
This is really nice.
Yeah, the last time I talked to you, you were 28. Now you're 41. How does that happen?
Yeah, God, it's getting faster and faster, man. You better start a podcast soon, or I'll just be dead.
Yeah. No, maybe you'll be like 90. I see a long life in your future. As long as
I gotta
you keep
fucking get on that
routine.
Aoki routine, man. I gotta start getting a hyperbaric chamber and freezing myself.
Yeah.
And
fuck, man. Yeah, Steve, you got to come on the podcast, dude. Oh wait, he did do the podcast.
He did mine. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah. That's right.
It was great. Yeah.
You have to do like a a checkup with him, because I feel like when was he on?
He was on. It was during the pandemic, so probably like.
Oh yeah, so it's been a while. Things have changed.
Oh yeah,
like technology. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
He needs to start a podcast.
That would be really interesting.
Just like even if it was monthly, just like, here's all the fucking crazy shit you can do to your body.
Well, because did you see him he did Joe Rogan's podcast like a year ago or something? And that was so funny to me. I wanted it to be more than what it was, because it was a lot of just Joe Rogan being like, so you throw cakes at people, that kind of shit. But
was it really?
I mean, yeah, they got into some weird, because both of them are into weird, like, cryo shit and life extension.
Yeah.
So they spent a lot of time talking about that too. But I don't know, man. I just feel like he's such an interesting dude. Like, you could talk to him about almost anything.
Yeah, he's 1 in a million. That's for sure.
Yeah, what a maniac! Shout out to Stevie Aoki. Oh man, but this is fucking great, dude. I'll let you go. I'm sure Joanne's ready for me to end this. So let me return you to your family.
I guess I do probably need to go fulfill my fatherly duties. It's been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you for having me on again. I hope I'm able to sustain a career for long enough that I can come on again.
You know why I like talking to you, man?
This is now the metric for have I remained relevant enough that people care to hear my voice on the Willy Joy podcast? Well, hey man, I'm back to back. Sorry,
that's an honor.
Never call it the Willy Joy podcast.
No, you're all good. It's an honor to me to be an official gatekeeper. That's the first time I think anyone has officially termed me that. So I'll take it.
I would never call you a gatekeeper.
Nah, I'm joking.
You're a pioneer. How about that?
That's really sweet, man. That actually means a lot. The reason I like talking to you, one of the many reasons I like talking to you, you're like one of the only more self-deprecating people than me. So it's really nice to not have to be the self-deprecating guy for a second. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I do a pretty good job of it. That's one thing I'll say positively about myself is I sure know how to do that.
Yeah. Well, hey, man, that's the Jew in us coming out a little bit.
All day.
Can't stop it, man. Well, I love you, dude. It's great to talk to you. I'll let you go, man. But thank you for doing this again.
Yeah, of course. Shout out Back to Back Podcast.
Hey.
Streaming now everywhere podcasts are available.
Everywhere you find fine podcasts. Dude, have a great time on tour, man. The album's fucking great.
Thank you, dude. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. Take care, dude. Great to see you.
All right. Later, brother.
Man. Peace.